wa ba'd. So we left off how Imam Abu Hanifa, he started studying kalam. And kalam was basically at that time like a science of debate and talk about people's beliefs in different groups and different sects. So he was a businessman as well at the time. So he used to go and visit Basra for business. And he would engage in debates while he was in Basra, because the people of Basra, they were really known for having a lot of public debates. There were different groups there. Among the groups, there was the Khawarij or the Kharijites. There were the Shia. There were the Qadariya and many other groups. So he started engaging in this subject, and he was, engaging in debates with other people. And this is just something that a lot of people like to do, especially in the beginning, because people like to strengthen their faith by having a reason for believing what they believe. And also, sometimes people may not have the best of intention, but they like defeating their opponents in a debate. So they're like, see, I'm right and you're wrong, and they feel good about that. So he went through that phase. And many people go through that phase. Some people don't outgrow that phase in their life. So one of his students, Zufar, he said, I heard Abu Hanifa say that, Abu Hanifa speaking now, said, I used to look into kalam. Kalam is the science of theology and learning about different aspects of belief, until I became advanced in that subject. And people pointed me out, meaning I started becoming popular. So he gained some level of popularity, even though he was young. He was probably in his late teens or early 20s. And he said, after a while, I started to question, is this the right science? Should I be focusing in this? So he noticed that the people who were involved in these debates and this subject of kalam, their values were not the values of righteous people. They didn't look like the most pious of people. And he said, I saw that many of them, they were hard-hearted and they were very thick-skinned, and they didn't seem like the best Muslims. They're excellent debaters. They can make great points, great speakers, very eloquent, but it doesn't mean that they were pious. And so that's why it's really important that he was reflecting upon this. Like many people, they go through that stage in their life and they're like, I want to prove that my way and what I'm on is correct. But then sometimes the best people that you have who are making debates and arguments and stuff like that, they're not the most knowledgeable, or they're not even the most righteous. And that's why there's a difference. When we say in our prayer, in Surah Al-Fatiha, we say, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Guide us on the straight path. It doesn't say just guide us to the straight path. Because when you try to find the truth of something, is this true or is this not true? You spend hours and days, maybe years proving, look, this is why Islam is true. This is why Islam is true. Okay, once you've proven that it's true, you don't just get to the right path and then stop. You have to move along that path. You have to put it into practice. So it's not enough to just simply arrive at the truth and be convinced of the truth, but you got to put that truth in your life, and you got to follow. You got to pray. You got to fast. You got to be righteous. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he was getting to the point in his youth that, you know what, this debating, this is not the end all be all. I should consider a different path. Maybe this is not the right thing. And of course, he maintained his intelligence. Probably engaged in more debates later on in his life, but he cut it down. He said, I'm not just going to keep doing this all the time. So one day, the big change came when a woman came to him one day and asked him, I have a question for you. She just walked into a random circle. And sometimes people will ask the random person, I have a question for you. The first Muslim you can find, or the first Muslim speaker that seems to be clever and seems to be popular, I have a question for you. So they went to Abu Hanifa, and he was not an Imam or anything like that. He had not even studied fiqh at all. She said, I have a question. How should a man divorce his wife according to the Sunnah? Like how many times? He doesn't know the answer. I don't know. He said, but you should go and ask this guy named Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman. So Hamad was the most popular fiqh teacher in the city of Kufa, where Abu Hanifa was. And he wasn't too far. So she said, you know what, just go to that other masjid over there and ask Imam Hamad. He knows the answer. He's the person to ask those kind of questions to. And normally what most people would do is they'd say, yeah, bye. But Imam Abu Hanifa, he was not like that. He's not an Imam yet. Abu Hanifa was not like that. He said, and do me a favor. Once you get the answer from Hamad, come back here and tell me what the answer is. And so that's humility. Because he says, first of all, he said, I don't know. He didn't make up, he's a good debater. He's very popular. He's doing debates in Basra. But somebody asked him a fiqh question, which you would think that maybe he knows. He's like, I don't really know. Ask the other person. But then he's not, number one, he's humble. And number two, he's sincere. He goes, I want to know the answer too. I'm interested in knowing what the answer is, so come back and tell me. So the lady goes, gets the answer from this guy named Imam Hamad, comes back, tells Abu Hanifa, said, you directed me to him. I appreciate it. I'll tell you the answer. Hamad said that if a man wants to divorce his wife according to the sunnah, the correct way, he should pronounce divorce one time. And he should do it when she's not having her period. He has not slept with her yet. And then she waits 2 more periods. And once she finishes her period, the divorce is over and she can go and remarry and get married to somebody else. As soon as Imam Abu Hanifa at this time, he heard the answer, he realized, he said, I should have known that. I didn't know this. And he said, this is really important information. So he decided, you know what? I should start attending this man's classes too. So he decided he's going to go and start studying with Hamad as well. And so this is a very important lesson. Number one, he was humble, he was sincere, he was genuine, he wanted to know the answer, and he was not proud. Some people, they're very proud in their position. They say, you know what, I have a following. People attend my lectures, people attend my public debates, and I'm so good in debate, I'm not going to go sit in anybody else's class. I'm important. Abu Hanifa was humble even at this young period of time. And so Imam al-Shafi'i, we haven't covered his life yet, but he has a line of poetry. It's a very wise line of poetry. He said, كُلُّ مَزْدَدْتُ عِلْمًا ازْدَدْتُ عِلْمًا بِجَهْلِ. So every time I increased in my knowledge, and every time I learned something new, I increased in the knowledge about my own ignorance. Meaning I learned how ignorant I really was. And that's the case for a lot of people. A lot of people that think, yeah, I know that subject really well. I don't need to attend the class. I don't need to read a book. I don't need any of that. And then one day, somehow, they finally decide to keep their ears open and somebody teaches them something that they didn't know. And they go, oh, I didn't know that. I'm surprised. I can't believe that. I didn't know that. First of all, why did you think that you knew that somehow? Have you studied that subject? No. So what happens, this happens to a lot of people. They assume that their base of knowledge is like this. They're like, yeah, this is how much knowledge I have on this subject. And then when 2 or 3 times they learn something that they didn't know, and they're like, I didn't know that. They learn something else. I didn't know that. Then they realize that their knowledge was actually like this. It was much smaller than they thought. And that's exactly what happened to Abu Hanifa. So he had an epiphany. He has a moment where he starts thinking, man, what I think I know, I really don't know that much. I'm popular, I give lectures, I go to Basra, I even engage in debates in another city. People invite me and I'm giving public lectures. And he's 22 years old now. And he's saying, you know what, but I didn't even know this basic question. There's probably a lot more that I don't know. So he said, I picked up my sandals and I went to go study with Hamad. And at the time he was 22 years old. So he goes and studies with this man by the name of Imam Hamad. So who is this guy? Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman, he is the scholar of fiqh, the top scholar of fiqh in the city of Kufa. And fiqh is the understanding of the Sharia, trying to understand what does Allah want us to do? Is something halal, haram? Is it fard? Is it sunnah? Is it makruh? Is it haram? Well, all that stuff. So Hamad is the top teacher. And Hamad is carrying on the teachings of one of the companions by the name of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, see the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, they all lived with him. I mean, they all lived around him and they learned from him. But not everyone was at the same level of knowledge. Abu Bakr is not at the same level of knowledge, as somebody else. I mean, Abu Bakr's higher, So there were some people who were the top among the Sahaba. Among them, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Umar, Aisha, um, a few others, right? Ubay ibn Ka'ab, Abdullah ibn Umar, some others. So they were the top. So among the top of the Sahaba, of the scholars, one of them was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And he, when Umar was the Khalifa, Umar was the second Khalifa, very early on, right after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. When Umar became the Khalifa and the city of Kufa was there, he picked Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and he said, "You are going to be the main teacher in this city of Kufa," which was a very, very important city. So I'm assigning you as the Khalifa, you're going to be the head of the city of Kufa, you're the main scholar in the city. So he was assigned by Umar himself. So he's teaching, and it's a long story, but he has two top students. His two top students, one of them, his name is Alqama, and the other one, his name is Al-Aswad. And then they teach the next generation, and their top student, his name was Ibrahim al-Nakhai. And Ibrahim al-Nakhai's best student was Hamad. So Hamad is like a student of the student of the student of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. They're top students. So he's basically in Kufa teaching the same style that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was teaching, who lived with the Prophet, peace be upon him, since the time of Mecca. He's one of the senior companions. And he spent a lot of time with the Prophet, peace be upon him. So Hamad is teaching. He's a very famous Imam. And Imam Hamad, he's wealthy. We don't know exactly how he got his money, but somehow he had a lot of money. And because he had money, he was able to teach and dedicate all of his time to studying, research, and teaching. Because otherwise, other people, they have to go and they have to work a job and they don't have the time to do this. Allah blessed Hamad. He was able to be independently wealthy so he can go and focus on teaching, which is an important thing. Because the idea of scholars being independent and having an independent level of wealth, it's a privilege, but it has a lot of benefit. And so that's why a lot of people today, they complain. They say, in many parts of the Muslim world, they say, the scholars, if they're under the government, and even at that time, if they're under the government and they're relying on government funding, then sometimes you may think the government puts pressure on them. That, you have to give the answer that I like. And if you don't, then this is going to happen. And the same thing is, even if you're an independent place like America, they say, oh, well, if you work in a masjid and your livelihood is from that, then the board of the masjid is going to put pressure on you and make you give the answer that they want. We want to build this new thing, or we want to change this carpet. Make sure to give us the fatwa because, by the way, we pay your salary. And so it's a privilege when you have a scholar like Hamad who's wealthy and he doesn't need to worry about his work and he can focus on teaching. So we're going to find that Abu Hanifa is going to be somewhat similar, in a similar situation. So Abu Hanifa joins Imam Hamad's class. And in the beginning, he was put on the left side, back section, which is the area for beginners. And Abu Hanifa, he tells the story himself. He said, I used to listen to the questions in Hamad's class, and I would listen to his answers, and I would learn everything that he said, and I'd go back day after day attending his class again and again. And he says, I would remember every detail that he would say, and many of the other students, they wouldn't remember as much as me. So eventually, Hamad, he got so impressed with Abu Hanifa, even though he's in his early 20s. He said, from now on, only Abu Hanifa is going to sit next to me in the front of the class. He's the best student in this class. I want him right in front of me. Which means that you have to earn your place in a class. There's no entitlement. Sometimes people, they feel entitled. They're like, I should get a one-on-one special class, with the top scholar of the city. It's not the way it works. You have to work your way up slowly. The same way Abu Hanifa worked his way up. He started in the class all the way in the back row, the left side. Eventually he got a little bit closer. When he proved himself that he's one of the top students, Hamad said, I want this guy right next to me every class. I want this because he asks the best questions. If I ask a question, he always gives the answer. So the teacher would naturally want somebody that's gifted like him, someone who's serious like him, dedicated like him. They would want him to be right there in the front. So he studied with Imam Hamad for 10 years. And then he tells a story. And he said, after 10 years of attending this man's classes, he finally started thinking, I should start my own class. So he mentions the story himself. He said, I studied with Hamad for 10 years, and then my nafs, my own ego. How old is Abu Hanifa right now? 32. So he's 32 years old. He studied for 10 years with the same teacher. He said, I finally started to want to start my own class. And what caused me that? My own nafs, my own desire to become important, to become prominent, so that people would say, hey, look, he's an Imam Abu Hanifa. He's not just Abu Hanifa. So he said, my nafs told me I should try to make myself popular. So I decided I'm going to start my own class. So he said, one day I went out in the evening time and I decided, you know what? I'm breaking off from Hamad. I'm going independent. I'm going to quit his class. I'm going to start my own school. I don't need his school anymore. And he said, I walked into the masjid and I saw my Imam, Hamad, and I looked at him and I had such a love for him. I realized that, you know what? No, there's no way I'm going to quit his class. I'm just not going to be happy if I leave him. He had such a love for Hamad and Hamad had such a love for him. He says, no, 10 years I've dedicated to this man. I can't do it. There's just no way I'm going to break off from him. And so this is important because Abu Hanifa, 10 years. Many people would be like, you know, I should be a sheikh. You know, I could be my own imam. I could start my own school. This guy, he's old now. I've learned everything that I need to learn from him. 10 years of studying almost every single day with this guy. I don't need this guy anymore. Abu Hanifa was humble. And he had a connection with his teacher, a deep connection with his teacher. So he says, no, I'm not just going to leave. I just wouldn't feel good. So he resisted that temptation and he recognized what was the temptation? I wanted to become popular. And he said, you know what? Because he would become popular if he split off. But now I'm under somebody else. The teacher gets the popularity for his students, how good they are. So he resisted that temptation. But then he said, subhanAllah, you know what happened? The same night that he had made that intention, he goes, I'm going to break off. And then he said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm canceling that plan. The same night, by Allah, we don't say coincidence, you know, it happened, everything's by Allah. Hamad got a letter. And the letter said that a relative of his, of Hamad in Basra, has died. And there's no heir. Nobody's going to inherit from that relative except Hamad. So he needs to go to Basra immediately. So he goes, okay, I need to travel. He goes, I might be gone for a long time. This is a family issue. Somebody has to take over teaching for me. So who did he appoint? Abu Hanifa. He said, you are going to take over and you're going to teach in my place while I'm gone. So exactly what was going through his mind, I'm going to break off, I'm going to start my own school. The same night, and he said, no, I'm not going to do it. What did Allah give him? The position and the opportunity to teach in place of his teacher while his teacher is gone in the same school as the lead teacher. So Hamad leaves. And he is gone for 2 months. So he doesn't come back for a long period of time. Abu Hanifa is teaching, people come and ask him questions. So he says, I was asked 60 questions that I'd never got an answer from my teacher about these issues. I mean, they get hundreds of questions. Every single day, hundreds of people are coming. Hey, Sheikh, is this halal? Is this haram? If I do this, what happens? If I do this, does it break my prayer? If I do this for my fasting? They're answering questions all day long. So he said, out of 2 months of teaching, while Hamad is gone, 60 questions I got asked. I had never learned the answer from my teacher. I learned everything. In 10 years, I never encountered these 60 questions before, and I wasn't sure 100% of what Hamad's opinion would be. But I gave all 60 answers. So he said, I wrote down every single question, and I wrote down exactly my answer. When Hamad came back after his trip, after a long time, I went over every single question with him, and I asked him, what do you think? And he said, on 40 of those questions, he agreed with my answer and said, yes, my answer would have been the same. On 20 of those, he said, I disagree with what you told the person. I would have said this. And when he looked at Hamad's answer and he looked at his own answer, He goes, he made a decision. He said, I decided at that moment when I heard on the 20 he would have differed from me. I said, I have decided I am never going to leave this man's study circle until one of us dies. This is because this guy has so much knowledge, I am just benefiting so much. So this shows that Abu Hanifa, he didn't insist on his humility, insist on his own opinion. Some people, what would they do? They say, you know, I studied for 10 years. So what if my teacher disagrees with me? I disagree with him. I have my own school. No. He said, Hamma, I respect his answers so much. On the 20, I'm going to sit with him even longer. I've not learned enough from this man. I still have a lot more to learn. There was another time something similar happened. He visited Basra one time, and he was taking questions. And he said, by this time, I thought that, you know what, this is later on. He said, I thought I could answer anybody's question. So people would come and they'd ask him questions. And he goes, I've answered thousands of questions under the tutelage of this Imam. So people in Basra, they would ask some weird questions. So they started asking him, and he goes, they asked me things I could not answer. And I simply didn't know the answer. And I made up my mind again. I said, until Hamad or I die, I'm never going to stop attending this guy and keep learning from him. I have to keep learning. So he studied with this one Imam, Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman, for 18 years. Hamad died in the year 120. Abu Hanifa was born in the year 80, after Hijrah. So how old was Abu Hanifa when he was still attending this man's class? This is pretty quick, easy math. He was 40 years old, right? So 40 years old, he did not start teaching his own classes. He said, I'm going to keep on attending this man's classes. It's a very important reminder. Abu Hanifa understood that it's a very common problem for people. They get to an intermediate level and they think that they're an expert. And then they have to learn the hard way. They have to learn the hard way, and you get some question, you realize, I don't know. I do need to go and ask someone who's actually at an expert level. And this is a mistake that you should try to avoid, because when someone's a beginner, they go, oh, they don't know that they're a beginner. Once you become intermediate, sometimes you start thinking you're actually more advanced than you really are. Abu Hanifa, because of his humility, he was able to keep advancing, he was able to keep learning. So he studied 18 years with this Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman. This doesn't mean that he didn't have any other teachers. This was his main teacher, but he had lots of other teachers, right? Especially after Hamad passed away. So he studied with all the other scholars in the city of Kufa. And Abu Hanifa said himself, he said, I learned the fiqh of Umar, I learned the fiqh of Ali, the fiqh of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and the fiqh of Ibn Abbas from all of their top students. Now, where were their top students? They were not in Kufa. They were elsewhere. So how did he learn? How did he study with other teachers if he lived in Kufa? Well, he traveled to Mecca, and usually when you travel to Mecca, you also travel to Medina. So he traveled to Mecca and or Medina at least 15 times in his life. Some narrations say he did Hajj like 30, 40, 50 times in his life, because he had a lot of money and he also had time. So he would just perform so many times. He went for Hajj, he went for Umrah, went for visits and stuff like that. So this gave him an opportunity to meet scholars from all around the world, because the scholars from everywhere, they're all going to perform Hajj too. So anyone who's in Syria, anyone who's in Egypt, anyone who's in Yemen, anyone who's in a different city, they're going to go for Hajj. And then what do? When they're in Mecca and they're there for Umrah or for Hajj, oh, the other top scholars visiting, other top scholars visiting. Let's all sit down and have a gathering and a discussion. So they would learn from each other. And this is the way that scholars would learn from each other. So Abu Hanifa studied with scholars from Kufa, his own city, from Basra, which was nearby, and he used to do business in Basra. So every time he would go and visit the scholars of Basra. And from the scholars in Medina and the scholars in Mecca that he would meet whenever they would go around. And so it's important that it is important to have one primary teacher, but it's also important to not only have one teacher, but to also try to learn things from other people. And so what some people do is they'll do one of the two extremes. They say, I have no teacher. I go to random classes all over the place and I have no primary teacher. And what happens if you do that? You start to become confused. Well, that teacher said one thing and the other person said something else, and I don't even know what to follow anymore. Then other people, they say, no, I only have one teacher. I only follow my own group because they're from my tribe in my village or my movement or whatever. I will not attend anybody else's classes. Now you don't know, like you get stuck maybe in a cult like type of environment, and you don't want that either. So it is healthy, just like Abu Hanifa, to have one primary teacher, that's your main teacher, but then you also go and you attend other people's classes and other people's lectures. So he studied with other scholars. Among them, we'll just mention a few. He studied with one scholar by the name of Ata ibn Abi Rabah, who was in Mecca. And Ata was such a prominent scholar. He was a former slave, for coming from this family. He was such a prominent scholar that Abdullah ibn Umar, who's a companion, Abdullah ibn Umar lived with the Prophet ﷺ. Abdullah ibn Umar, when he was in Mecca, he used to say, why are people coming and asking me questions when Ata ibn Abi Rabah is here? You could ask him. Somebody who's never seen the Prophet, he's saying he knows more than I do, and I lived with the Prophet. That's how knowledgeable this man was. And Ata was so important that in Mecca, the government gave a verdict. Nobody in the whole city of Mecca is allowed to give a fatwa except this one guy, Ata ibn Abi Rabah. So Abu Hanifa, he studied with him, even in his early days. So the first time he arrived in Mecca, he went to his study circle and he said, I'd like to sit with you in your study circle. So Ata said, there's an entrance exam. We have to test you first to see if you're allowed to be in my class. Not everyone's allowed. It's not like a public lecture. You better be qualified to sit in my class. So they asked him. So he said, what are your questions? He said, I want to know the details about what are your beliefs as a Muslim. I don't want any weird people with weird beliefs sitting in my class. So Abu Hanifa, he summarized, he said, here's my answer. He said, I don't say anything bad about the early Muslims. I do not say that sinners are disbelievers, and I believe in the decree of Allah. He was allowed in as a student. Now, some of you will hear that and you're like, what? What is that? What is that supposed to mean? There were three main opposition sects in Islam at the time. And so Abu Hanifa, in one sentence, passed the exam and explained, I'm not part of any of those groups. So when he said, I do not say anything bad about the early Muslims, like the early Muslims, like the Sahaba, he's basically saying, I am not among the Shia who believe that many of them at that time, or some of them at the time, they believe the Sahaba became bad after the Prophet, peace be upon him. That many of the companions, they were bad, and they took the right from Ali, and they did bad things, and they say bad things about the companions and the Sahaba. So he basically said, I'm not one of those people who says anything bad about the early Muslims. So he basically saying, I'm not a Shia, I'm a Sunni. Number two, he said, I do not say that sinners are disbelievers. So there was a group called the Khawarij, and the Khawarij said that anyone who commits a major sin is a disbeliever. And if you're a disbeliever, your blood is lawful, and they launched rebellious movements and they tried to, overthrow, and they killed a lot of people. So he's like, I'm not one of those people. And then he said, I believe in the decree. I believe in qadr, qada and qadr. There was a group known as the Qadariyah, and they had this weird belief about the decree of Allah and what does it mean, free will versus predestination, and they would debate this and all that stuff. And he said, I'm not one of those people either. So in one sentence, he's like, I'm not any of these three. And he's like, okay, this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. You're welcome into the circle, and he studied with him. Every time he would visit Mecca, he would study with this Imam, Ata ibn Abi Rabah. Now, so at that time, remember, we're talking about the year 80 AH to 150 AH. This is the lifespan of Abu Hanifa. Scholars at that time, they would specialize in the field of either fiqh, or they would specialize in the field of hadith. They would usually pick one. They would study a little bit of both. Abu Hanifa, he chose to specialize in fiqh, to answer people's questions about halal, haram, those type of things. But doesn't mean he didn't study hadith. He studied hadith with about 300 different hadith scholars throughout his life. Most of those people, he studied with almost every top hadith scholar in the Muslim world at the time. 74 of his teachers are in the chains of narrations of the 6 major famous books of hadith: Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasai, Ibn Majah. So if you look at the chains of narrations, 74 of his teachers are mentioned in those chains. So he knows hadith very well. He also studied recitation of the Quran, what's called tajweed. And he studied tajweed from Imam Asim, who lived in Kufa. And Imam Asim was one of the 7 main reciters or main recitations that are popular among the styles that people recite in. So there are 7 main ones. One is Abu Amr, Hamza, Asim, Ibn Amir, Ibn Kathir, Nafi' and Kisai. Today, most people in the world, including like in America, most people, they read the recitation of Asim, of Hafs and Asim. So Imam Asim was one of those people. Unless you're from North Africa. If you're from North Africa, you're reciting a different one. What recitation? Does anyone know what it is? It's called Warsh, right? And so it's Imam Warsh and Nafi'. So the other recitation. So these are the 2 most popular recitations in the world today that people recite. And so Imam Abu Hanifa, he had a certification from Imam Asim himself, who was a specialist in recitation. So he knew the Quran very well. He knew to recite the Quran well. He knew tafsir, he knew hadith, but his specialty was in fiqh. And so later on, he's 40 years old, his teacher Hamad dies. And now that Hamad has passed away, he's age 40, he takes over the school of his teacher. So he becomes the main fiqh scholar in the city of Kufa. And now his popularity starts to spread. Because before they say, hey, you travel to Kufa, Imam Hamad is the top scholar in the city of Kufa. Everyone should visit him. Now who is it? Now it's this new guy named Imam Abu Hanifa Nu'man ibn Thabit. So they would come and they would visit him from all over the Islamic world. People would come to different cities and they say, I want to sit and I want to study with him. One time he went to visit Mecca. And by now he's so popular. Now he's Imam Abu Hanifa. So in Mecca, this large crowd of students gathered around. And they were it was so packed because keep in mind, no microphones, no speakers, so people would want to get close. It's not like sometimes in auditorium people want the back seat because I'm going to hear it anyways. So they would come close, and students would flock from all around. This is Mecca, so people have come from all around the Muslim world, and they're like, Imam Abu Hanifa is in Mecca right now. I want to go listen to his class. Let me go and ask him some questions. So people were packed in like sardines. And so Abu Hanifa, he saw this, and he's like, man, this is a mess. This whole thing is so many people and they're pushing each other. This is unorganized. So he said out loud, he said, I wish someone here could go and call my host, like the guy who invited me to give this talk. I wish someone could go and call him, get him over here and have him manage this crowd. This thing is so unorganized. Someone needs to handle this. So one guy, he was there. His name was Abu Asim Nabil. And he said, you know what? I'll do it. I'll go ahead and do it for you. But can I just ask some of my questions first? So he goes, okay, yeah, come forward. So he squeezed through the crowd. He came in the front. Imam Abu Hanifa gave him full attention because he said, this guy's so nice. He offered to go and do me this favor and go get the guy. So he said, okay, I'll answer your questions and then you can go do the job. So the guy started asking questions. Abu Hanifa started giving him really nice, detailed answers because he was so happy with the guy. And then after the guy was done, he forgot. They both forgot. He forgot. So Abu Hanifa started answering other people's questions. He answered other people's questions. And then he looks at the crowd again. He said, this is a mess. He said, wait a minute. Where's that guy who said he's going to go and get the host for me? The guy said, yeah, I'm right here. He goes, why are you still here? You said you're going to go and get the guy. Why didn't you go and get it? And so this guy decided to be smart aleck. And what does he do? He said, I didn't say I'd do it right now. I'm busy right now. You'd be like, what a punk, man. He just got the answer from Imam Abu Hanifa, and now he's going to play a game and be like, I didn't say right now. Abu Hanifa said, you're wrong. He says, because in normal conversation, you cannot use this type of argument. The way that an argument needs to be understood is that your words have to be understood the way that the average person around you understood them. So everybody else around, what did you guys understand? Did you understand that he's going to go right after he answers his question, or that he's going to go whenever he has time? They said, no, he said he's going to go right after he gets his question answered. He goes, so the principle in fiqh, and according in this discussion that we're having right now, is that you cannot use this literal type of argument. So technically, I didn't say I'd go now. I said I'd go. Abu Hanifa said, no, the principle in all type of transactions, and this is a transaction that we're having right now, when you told me you'll go, I understood and everyone else understood from your wording that what you meant was you're going to go right after I answer your question. And so therefore you have to go and you can't be the smart aleck and answer this question. And this is what people do in contracts. Right? When you make a contract with someone, say, well, read the fine print. The fine print said that this and this, because people try to do this in contracts. So Imam Abu Hanifa was very clever. He wouldn't allow people to try to play with him and do these little linguistic games and all that. He knew exactly how to respond. But he was also very humble. So he was popular. And despite his popularity, he was very humble. So when he visited Medina, there was another Imam, Imam Malik, which we're going to cover, maybe in a week or two. Another Imam who started his own school. Imam Malik was 13 years younger than Abu Hanifa. But Abu Hanifa said, I'm going to go and sit and study with this man as well. So he's from a different madhab, and he's younger than him, and he still goes and sits with Malik and he learns from him because he was teaching hadith and other stuff. So he had no problem sitting in a lesson of somebody else who's from a different school and who's not even as senior as he is. So one day Malik was teaching. Abu Hanifa came in. He was an old man by this time. So he came in and Imam Malik welcomed him with special respect. He said, welcome, Sheikh, please take a seat, come in. And this is how the scholars dealt with each other. Imam Abu Hanifa showed respect to Malik by attending his classes. Imam Malik showed respect to Abu Hanifa by welcoming him in the highest, showing him the most respect. And it's sad, unfortunately. Sometimes people, they become so, they have this what's called ta'assub. They have this this partisanship. They have this idea of my school is the only correct one. They have like animosity. Yeah, these Malikis and these Hanafis, they don't know what they're talking about. That's not how the founders were. That's not how Imam Abu Hanifa was with Imam Malik. And yet the followers who ascribe to them somehow think that they're different or they're better than their teachers or whatever. So they loved each other. They respected each other, even though they differed with one another, even in their methodology. So one day, Abu Hanifa came in and he sat down in the class. And after the class was done, he got up and he left. And he told his students, some of them didn't know because he's visiting, because Imam Malik's in Medina, Abu Hanifa is in Kufa. He was visiting Medina. So after he left, he asked his students, he said, do you guys know who that man is? So who's that guy? Some old guy came. He says, that is Imam Abu Hanifa from Iraq. He said, that man is so smart that, because they were sitting in the masjid, and he pointed to a pillar. And he said, if that man said that this pillar in the masjid was made of gold, it would have been made of gold. Meaning the man is so clever, he can debate, he's so smart that if he wanted to convince everyone in the whole room that this pillar is made of gold, he would have been able to do it. That's how clever and wise he is. So he had respect for Abu Hanifa very much, and they had mutual respect. Now, let's move on to his business, his profession. We talked about how Abu Hanifa was a businessman in the beginning of his life, and his father was a businessman. And what was his business? Does anyone remember? Silk. He buys and he sells silk. So, and he was wealthy. His father was well off, and Abu Hanifa was well off too. So we talked about how around the age of 20, he started studying. Did he give up his business or did he continue? He actually continued his business. Maybe he gave up for a little while. But he continued his business and he continued running the silk business all the way until he passed away, despite the fact that he's like the most prominent scholar in the world at the time. And so how did he do this? Either he had a partner, a business partner, or he hired a top manager that he trusted. And basically that manager or that partner would do most of the aspects of the business for him. So he just did a little bit of management and the other person did most of the work. So it allowed him to keep teaching. It allowed him to keep learning. And he's still making a lot of money, but he doesn't need to go and travel to this market and make this negotiation and make this deal. He just did kind of high-level deals or high-level management. And so, like I mentioned before, not every scholar was able to be independent of the government or independent of having a job, because they need their livelihood. But few of them, like Hamad, like Abu Hanifa, like a few other people, they were able to actually do business, or they inherited a lot of wealth and they used that wealth to be able to teach even more. So, despite the fact that Abu Hanifa was wealthy, he was very humble, he was very honest, and he was also very generous. And these are the three qualities that you need. And of course, he's very hardworking because he's dedicating himself on teaching and studying and researching. So, as a businessman, let's just talk about a few principles of his. One day, a woman came and she brought this silk garment that she wanted to sell. So she went to him and she says, "Hey, I want to sell this garment." So he goes, "Okay, how much do you want for it?" She says, "Just give me 100, maybe 100 dirhams or something like that." And he's so now a lot of people they would have been like, 100? It's a good deal. Okay, I'll take it. Abu Hanifa said, "You know what? It's worth more than 100." So she goes, "Okay, how much?" So he's how much? He's worth more than 100. She said, like, how much? 200? It's worth more than 200. 300? It's worth more than 300. 400? He said, it's probably worth more than that as well. And she's like, you know what? Stop making fun of me. I don't believe. There's no way it's worth more than this. Abu Hanifa said, I'm not making fun of you. Take it to that man in that part of the market and ask him to value it for you. So she said, okay. She went to the other man. He valued it and he said, I'll give you 500 for it. And she sold it on the spot for 500. So now Abu Hanifa, he didn't even buy it. But if you think somebody else came to you with this deal and they say, you know, I'll give it to you for 100. I know it's worth 500. I'll take it on the spot. Abu Hanifa didn't want to rip this woman off because she didn't understand what the value of this was. If she understood the value and she's trying to dump it, would have been a different situation. But she did not know what the value was, and he did not want to take advantage of her. And so he let the deal go, and he said, "No, it's you don't want to sell it for 100. You're going to get ripped off." So he did not take advantage of her, and so it shows you something about him. He was not just a scholar sitting in a study circle talking about Quran, and this is how you interpret Quran, this is hadith, this is how you interpret hadith. His actions were in line with his teachings. He spent all day teaching and researching, but he also applied those same principles in his life. Any hadith that he came about honesty and not taking advantage of people, any verse in the Quran he came across about not taking advantage of people, he applied it in his own life. And so that's number one. He, as they say, he talked the talk and he walked the walk. Number two, he was not an ivory tower intellectual where somebody doesn't know what's going on. So sometimes people they say, oh, some scholars, some intellectuals, some professors in university, they're just sitting in their thing. They don't even know what happens in the real world. Abu Hanifa was in business. He wasn't always in the market, but he would go to the market. He would manage a business. He knew what was going on. He knew what type of transactions would happen. He would deal with people on a regular basis. He's dealing with the women coming, and not only, I mean, men coming in as well, but maybe silk business, maybe more women were dealing in this material. Why would more women be dealing in the material of silk in a Muslim community? Question. Yes, Hussein. Because men are not allowed to wear silk and women are allowed to wear silk. Very good. All right. So he knew the way negotiations work. He knows what market prices are. So he is somebody who understands the needs of people as well. Another story about business. Another woman came to him one day, and she says, she's an older lady. She says, I'm in a weak position. Like I'm not well off, and I'm trusting you. So she says, I want you to sell me this garment. I want this garment from you, but I want you to give it to me at your cost. Because I'm like poor, right? I don't have a lot of money, and I have no idea what this kind of garment costs. So number one, I'm poor, please help me out. Number two, I want that garment, but I'm just gonna trust you that I have no idea what it costs. Tell me what your real cost is, and please just give it to me for your cost. So Abu Hanifa said, okay. And he's selling silk, remember, it's supposed to be expensive. So he goes, okay, you can have it for 4 dirhams. She goes, don't make fun of me. Like, I'm an old woman. She said, I'm an old woman. You shouldn't be making fun of old women because we're in a weaker state. And he goes, listen, ma'am, khala, I'm not making fun of you. I bought bought two garments in one deal, and I sold one of them for the cost of both of them minus 4 dirhams. So this garment is now worth 4 dirhams. You pay me 4 dirhams and it belongs to you. So what did he do? He probably bought two garments for like 1,000 dirhams or like 500 dirhams. He sold it for, he sold one of them for almost double, 1,000 dirhams minus 4. He sold it for, how many dirhams did he sell for? 996. We have some business people in the audience, right? Sold it for 996, and he goes, I just got 4 left. So if I apply the profit there, I got 4 dirham. You know what? You can have this for 4 dirhams. So this was a way of giving her charity. He's giving her charity and saying, I'm going to give it to you at my cost, but not my real cost. He didn't say, this was my cost, divide by 2. He said, this is my cost. I made so much money off the second one, and the two of them came in a deal. I'm going to give this to you for 4 dirhams. He gave it to her for 4 dirhams. And he made good profit on the other garment. So he's good. He's like, I'm fine. Another time, a friend of his came. So again, he's very generous. He's honest, but he's also very generous. So one of his friends came one time, and he said, I want this specific silk garment. It's going to be like this. I want this color. I want this. I want all of this. Abu-Hanifah said, okay, it's going to take a little while for it to arrive. I'll let you know when it comes, and then we can talk. I'll get it for you though, inshallah. So the guy said, okay. 1 week later, it arrived. So he went to his friend and he said, hey, this is the garment that you've been wanting. It's here. He goes, okay. He said, how much is it? It was 1 dirham. So the friend is like, I didn't think you're going to make fun of me, man. Come on. We've been friends for a long time. Because I'm not making fun of you. Everyone, he's so charitable and so honest. People are always thinking that he's joking with them. He goes, no, I'm serious, like 1 dirham. He goes, I bought 2 garments for 20 dinars plus 1 dirham. I sold one of them for 20, and 1 dirham remains. So I'm going to give it to you for 1 dirham. Because this is his friend. He's not doing this with everybody. It's not like he didn't make money. Of course, he made profit in his business. But when he decides to be charitable, he's doing it in one way where he's very generous. At the same way, he's not giving it to him for free. At least you have to pay the cost so you appreciate the value of this garment. You don't get the whole thing for free. And so two more stories, and then we'll conclude for today. Once he sent his manager, he had a manager whose name was Hafs, and he sent him with some clothes to go and sell. And he said, there is a defect in one of these garments. When you sell it, make sure to clearly point out the defect before the person buys it. So his manager, when he goes to sell it, his manager forgot, and he sold it. Abu Hanifa found out, goes, yeah, you made good money. Yeah, I made good money. Did you let the person know that there was a defect? Oh, subhanallah, I totally forgot. He goes, subhanallah, you should not have forgotten. Go and find the person you sold it to. I have no idea who that person was. There's no receipts. They kept their email with me or something. There's no way to contact that person ever again. Abu Hanifa was feeling bad. He goes, we just sold a garment that had a defect in it, and we don't know what the value of that defect could have been. It could have been 1 dirham, could have been 50 dirhams. We don't know if the person recognized the defect and was fine with the price, or they're going to recognize it when they get home and they're going to be like, who sold me this? They ripped me off. So Abu Hanifa said, what we're going to do is we're going to take the entire value of that garment with the defect and we're going to give it away as charity. What would most people do? Most people would say, let us estimate the value of the defect and only give that amount in charity. Abu Hanifa said, because we can't figure out exactly what the value is, it could have been a 1 dirham, a 10 dirham, a 100 dirham defect, we're going to give the entire value of that one garment, all going to go in sadaqah, so that we have not done anything like wrong on purpose. We're trying to make up for the mistake by selling someone and not pointing out the defect that was there. And so, what did Abu Hanifa do with all of this money that he made? So one of the things he used to do is he used to take the amount of money and he would spend it on his fellow scholars and his students as well. So he would go and pay for their food, he would pay for their clothing, he would pay for their other needs, and then at the end of the year, whatever money was left over from the profit he had specified, he would give them the additional profit. And he would basically fund scholars and he would fund some of his own students as well. And so when he used to give them the money at the end of the year, he'd say, buy whatever you need so you can keep studying, you can keep focusing on knowledge. But then he said, remember that this is just part of Allah's gift for you. I didn't give you any money. This is Allah's gift to you. Don't think it's coming from me, it's coming from Allah. And so that's how generous he was. And what he did was, this idea of funding is really important. He funded students and he funded scholars so that they could be independent, so that they can focus on their craft of like knowledge and teaching and studying and learning. And also, this comes into the idea of protection or independence of scholars. Kind of like today in the university system, we have what's called tenure. And the idea of tenure originated from, so we want intellectuals and professors to be able to not be afraid. They're able to speak their mind and speak their opinions, not afraid of losing their job or someone putting pressure on them, because these are people of value, people who study a lot. So he wanted something similar. And because he was blessed with the business, inherited business, but then he, continued the business, he was able to fund his own students who were not able to pay their own way, and he funded other scholars while he himself was a scholar as well. So we'll continue the rest next week, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Any questions anyone has about what we covered today? He's Persian, and he may have been from Afghanistan as well, but Persian from Afghanistan, because the Persians were there too at the time. Yeah. So, any other questions? Then we will see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. You can ask me.